There are some things in life people have strong opinions about, including religion, politics, and apparently Arby's. For whatever reason, the world has drawn battle lines over whether the franchise is underappreciated or if it should be shot into space, never to return. And that's why today we're pondering the question, does Arby's deserve more respect? But before we dig in, be sure to subscribe to the Weird History Food channel. After that, please leave a comment and let us know what other disrespected franchises you would like to hear about. Okay, are you ready for RB? Let's hope so, because here we go. The name Arby's sounds like a nickname, although what it's short for isn't so obvious. Arbuckle? Arbert? Arbitration? Actually, it's none of those. It's just the letters R and B, which is obviously short for roast beef. Or so you'd think, given that Arby's specializes in roast beef sandwiches. But it turns out, that's just a coincidence. The R and B in Arby's actually refers to the Raffle brothers, who founded the company in 1964. Leroy and Forrest Raffle were owners of a restaurant equipment business, who eventually decided to use some of that equipment to pivot into the world of making food. And despite the fact they got the idea for the restaurant in Massachusetts and opened the first one in Ohio, they initially planned to call it Big Tex. That name, however, was already taken, so Arby's it was. Their initial idea for Arby's was to create a fast food place that wasn't centered around hamburgers. Essentially, what if McDonald's, but not McDonald's? And their early approach was to offer a bit more class and luxury than the typical fast food experience of the era. To that end, they served their roast beef sandwiches for 69 cents at a time when McDonald's was charging 15 cents for a hamburger. The brothers' goal was to carve out a new lane in fast food, a place where you could go get a roast beef sandwich that felt a little more steakhouse-light and a little less school cafeteria, all while keeping the speed of a drive-thru. As the brand developed, they leaned into that identity with slogans that made their mission loud and clear. The most famous, America's roast beef, yes sir, wasn't just catchy, it was basically a patriotic command. Yes, long before Arby's was associated with bass-heavy needle drops and the deepest voiceover on television,
we have the meats.
It was still an exercise in machismo. Their very first restaurant in Boardman, Ohio, embodied that vision. It had a distinctive chalet-style roof and a massive glowing neon cowboy hat towering over the entrance. So even if you didn't know what kind of food they served, you absolutely knew what you were getting yourself into. Arby's first menu featured a roast beef sandwich, potato chips, and, well, that's it. Sure, there were beverages, including soft drinks, milkshakes, coffee, milk, and juice, but no two ways about it. Whichever you chose, you were having it with a relatively expensive roast beef sandwich and potato chips. Despite the premium pricing, the concept took off faster than a cow running from an Arby's meat supplier. Within a year, the first expansion restaurant was opened in Akron, and throughout the 70s, they were cranking out about 50 new stores annually, which is basically multiplying like rabbits, even in fast food terms. Not everything, however, went quite so smoothly. In 1970, they attempted an IPO that fizzled when the stock market tanked. In 1971, they filed for reorganization in bankruptcy court. And in 1976, they sold the whole operation to Royal Crown Cola for $18 million. You probably know Royal Crown better as RC Cola. So yeah, that's right. RC bought RB. Anyway, over the next few decades, Arby's would continue to change hands from one multinational corporation to another. And while the classic roast beef has always been their bread and butter, or bread and roast beef as the case may be, they managed to make some improvements to the menu along the way. In the 70s, for example, they added the beef and cheddar, Jamocha shakes, chicken sandwiches, Arby's sauce, and horsey sauce. Curly fries showed up in 1988, originally called Curly Q fries, because Arby's loves naming things all weird. They tossed in baked potatoes in 85, a light menu with sub-300 calorie salads in 1991, gyros twice, and then in 2014, the dropped big one, the Smokehouse Brisket, which still stands as Arby's most successful new item ever. Sliders hit in 2015, and 1 million sold in a month. And in 2022, Arby's did the unthinkable and introduced its first ever hamburger. the Wagyu Deluxe Steakhouse Burger. Because even the McDonald's of not being McDonald's eventually had to become McDonald's. Arby's reputation has always lived in one of two lanes. Die-hard loyalists who think the classic roast beef is an upgrade from a cheap hamburger, and haters who treat the brand like a punchline on wheels.
I'm so hungry I could eat at Arby.
And that divide became quantifiable when geotagged Twitter data from the Daring Kitchen labeled Arby's the most hated fast food chain in 4 states: Florida, Georgia, Illinois, and Arkansas. Sure, it wasn't exactly a peer-reviewed academic study, but it confirmed what most people already suspected. Arby's inspires feelings, strong ones. Some of that comes from recurring complaints about taste and quality, especially from reviewers who treat fast food sandwiches with the seriousness of Michelin inspectors. The corned beef Reuben, for example, was dragged as a mushy, messy disaster, while the classic roast chicken sandwich gets dinged for dry, chewy poultry. That makes you wonder what pipeline it traveled through to arrive at the restaurant. These reviews, fair or exaggerated, fuel the perception that Arby's menu is inconsistent, even as the chain continues broadening it beyond roast beef. But the biggest dents in Arby's image have come from controversies that are easier to put your finger on. You'll get that reference in just a moment. In 2004, an Ohio man discovered a piece of skin about 3/4 of an inch long in his chicken sandwich, after an employee sliced off part of their thumb while shredding lettuce. In 2012, a Michigan teenager found a chunk of worker's finger in his sandwich after another slicer accident. So Arby's does have the meats. Less in a restaurant sense and more of a Tim Burton, Helena Bonham Carter sense. Then there's the liquid meat legend, one of fast food's most persistent urban myths. Since the late 1990s, rumors have circulated that Arby's roast beef arrives as a paste, gel, or some other industrial goo squeezed into shape. Arby's Quality Assurance Department has repeatedly shot this down, insisting it is actual beef. But of course, even by having to say it, you might have lost the argument. The rumor probably stuck around because the meat ships in airtight bags sitting in a gelatinous broth, which, yes, looks gray, soft, and ominously squishy. Not great optics for a brand already fighting jokes about mystery meat. Of course, not everything is just memes and meat paste conspiracies. Some complaints are very real and very expensive. Arby's is currently fighting 2 major class action lawsuits. One claims the chain's ads show sandwiches with twice the meat and a rosy pink glow you'll never see in real life, because the actual roast beef is, well, more gray adjacent. A federal judge let that case move forward in 2025, with more than $5 million on the line. The other lawsuit accuses Arby's of straight-up shrinkflation, quietly swapping their old small fries for kid-sized portions, without lowering the price. Long story short, Arby's may have more beef outside the kitchen than inside it. And that may be the Arby's legacy, a brand loved, hated, memed, sued, sold, resurrected, mocked, defended, and still somehow standing. Cowboy hat neon glowing on the horizon, asking America the eternal question. You good? You want some roast beef? In showbiz, they say any publicity is good publicity, as long as they spell your name right. And when analyzing Arby's reputation at large, it's important to note that one of the chain's longest-running bits of cultural relevance comes from its playful feud with Jon Stewart. Starting in 2013, Stewart roasted Arby's so relentlessly that the chain easily could have taken offense. Instead, they mailed him free lunch every time he attacked them. Maybe it's because he always spelled their name right. Anyway, when Stewart retired, Arby's went all in, sponsoring an entire episode of The Daily Show, airing custom commercials, and even introducing a secret off-menu item called the Daily Deli, a double corned beef on rye, in his honor. It was one of the clearest examples of Arby's leaning into the joke and embracing its role as America's favorite punchline with self-aware swagger. And that strategy later expanded into their broader marketing. To counter the belief they only serve roast beef, for example, Arby's launched the 2018 "We Have the Meats for Sandwiches" campaign. emphasizing menu diversity as sales softened. They also kept trolling vegetarians, rolling out a fake vegetarian support hotline in 2015 and a leap day vegetarian-friendly menu, consisting entirely of buns served without meat. Before anyone knew it, the public was busy talking about whether they agreed with Jon Stewart and just how funny the vegetarian jokes were, rather than, well, whether they found a severed human finger hiding in their roast beef. Today, Arby's still operates over 3,600 restaurants across 6 global markets, and they were ranked 3rd among U.S. fast food sandwich chains in 2024. That being said, the year wasn't so great. Sales dropped 6.3%. They closed a net 48 locations, and they lagged behind the other chains owned by their corporate master, Inspire Brands, presumably ones that were more inspired. Ultimately, Arby's image is the product of real controversies, exaggerated internet lore, and a meme ecosystem that refuses to let the chain breathe. Nonetheless, Arby's has learned to survive by leaning into self-awareness. They may not be loved in every state, but they've carved out a niche as America's most polarizing sandwich shop and turned even their strangest headlines into marketing fuel. And you gotta respect that. So what do you think? And will you be stopping by an Arby's anytime soon? Let us know in the comments below. And while you're at it, check out some of these other videos from Weird History Food.